Hey everyone, Griffin here. Today I wanted to talk about the basics and fundamentals of draft. So this video is going to mostly center on the basics. I'm not going to go into too complicated of ideas and thoughts, but I do have a lot of thoughts myself that I want to kind of place out because I think a lot of people don't understand how drafts work. Now this is a video that I've wanted to make for probably about a month now, but I've been delaying myself, basically procrastinating, right? But especially after kind of the G2 versus Mad Lions and G2 versus Rogue series, I wanted to make this video purely because I've seen a lot of discourse online, especially Twitter and Reddit, where people just they keep talking about the draft, even though it seems like they don't really quite understand how draft in general just works, right? So I personally wanted to create a video that kind of breaks down drafts in a very simple way so that you can understand it as a viewer um, on a simple level, right? So that you just understand what's going on in the draft and why it is so important. Because draft is one of the most important things currently, I think, in the competitive landscape at least. Because when you have two teams and one has a better draft than the other, usually the one with the better draft is going to win, unless the other team just purely uh, out, you know, out micros them in the sense that like they're just so much better that no draft can help the other team, right? So without further ado, I'm going to get into kind of the basics of draft. I'm going to get into a standard draft that would find. I feel like I would find in league, in competitive league, specifically in LEC and LCS. I think this is um, the most basic of drafts that I could simply see, right? So on blue side, it's going to be first ban TF. Then on the red side, it's going to be Senna, because the enemy team doesn't want the blue team to pick Senna or whatever. It doesn't really matter much. So sometimes you're going to see a Seraphine ban on blue side. Sometimes you're going to see it on red side. I'm just going to opt not to pick Seraphine here because I see a lot of times it goes through drafts, even though I think Seraphine is just such a broken champion currently. But that's besides the point. So ban 2 for blue side is going to be Thresh. I'm not sure why it keeps getting banned, but it is what it is. I mean, I understand on a level of like, Thresh is a huge playmaker. He's a hook champion, so if he gets you, you're pretty much, just you don't want to play against that. Though I don't entirely agree with the sentiment. I think that you can play around Thresh, and there have been games where Thresh hasn't won the game, or even games that have Thresh and that have won usually weren't because of Thresh. But that's besides the point. Red team is gonna probably ban something like Lucian. Um, Blue team is going to ban Tristana here, let's say, or they could ban Orianna. It doesn't really matter. Usually they don't want to ban Orianna. They want to pick it, so we're going to say that Triss gets banned here. Ban 3 is going to be, I don't know, let's say Jinx. Jinx has gotten, finally, a lot of love. I really love Jinx. I think she's a very fun champion both to watch and play. She's one of my favorite ADCs currently. I think Jinx and Senna are both very good bans, and Tristana as well. So, they ban Twisted Fate, you ban Lucian because, you can't pick it first, but the blue team can, whatever, it doesn't matter. So, B1. Usually, at least right now, it's junglers, right? So it's going to be, like always, like almost every single game that we see, it's going to be Hecarim into Udyr, right? So, Hecarim first pick into Udyr first pick on red side. Then R2 is usually going to be Rel here, right, for the engage. Then on B2 we're going to see Alistar because people think that, they're pretty close matched and that Alistar, I guess, kind of counters Rel, though that's not entirely true. B3, I'm going to say, Orianna is going to get picked on B3 because Orianna, she's a pretty good champion right now. I think she's really good, especially in the current meta. I think Orianna is a really good champion. Any case, this is kind of, I'm first going to do the picks and kind of explain some of the picks, as I'm going through, but then afterwards we're going to look at the picks entirely and what and why they function. So on R3 we're going to see Victor because it's a pretty standard pick and they don't want to have it banned. We're probably going to be banning, I don't know, let's think about it. So what would this team ban? Probably, I don't know. They would probably ban something like, let's say, Xayah, right? They don't want Xayah to be able to destroy these champions, which he doesn't, but people are scared of her regardless. On B4, they're not going to ban Kai'Sa or any ADC because they're scared of pinching the ADC pool even further. So they want to pick Gnar here, so they're going to ban Aurelia. Here we're going to see a ban of Kai'Sa because Kai'Sa is a really strong champion right now, 100%. We're going to see Kai'Sa banned. Then we're going to see here coming in the ban is going to be probably GP. It's either going to be GP or Jace. Usually it's going to be GP when you're trying to pick Gnar. So on R4, we're just going to blind pick our top laner because we're going to let our ADC have the counter pick. So it's going to be Sion, which is a fine blind pick. Not too strong of a champion, but not too bad of a champion either. On B4, we're going to see, Gnar obviously picked because you are drafting for it. Then on B5, there aren't many ADCs that you can pick already. You've pinched the ADC pool by quite a lot, which is Stana, Jinx, Xayah, and Kai'Sa, which is why I think the R5 counter pick is good for ADCs here. Usually we see ADCs being picked in the first half, but it doesn't really matter, I don't think. So usually I think we would see probably a Vayne pick here because, it's going into Rel, it's going into Udyr, it's going into Sion. You're thinking, oh, they're tanky, Vayne would be good here, right? On R5, we're just going to see Varus because Varus is really good into Vayne. He outranges her very hard, and it's a very good lane matchup as well. So, you could make an argument for Ezreal. I don't think Sivir is good enough to be picked like this, and, I don't think Kog'Maw necessarily can be picked in either of these compositions because they don't really have protect the Kog'Maw composition, which Kog'Maw really kind of needs, in my opinion, to be able to function. I don't think you can just pick Kog'Maw like this randomly. You need to have a composition basically built around Kog'Maw, basically built around protecting your carry, your ADC. So let's talk about what you should be looking for here. So in this specific draft, this is kind of the most standard, most simple draft that I could think of when thinking about drafting in normal professional play like LEC, LCS, even somewhat in LPL and LCK, though much less there than here. But don't get me wrong, this is still a composition that you can see both in LPL and LCK, but much more frequently in the LEC and LCS. And I think a lot of people that are not that good at discerning and dissecting drafts usually watch LEC and LCS. So I kind of want to broaden the scope a bit and kind of show you what you should be looking for within these drafts. So let's first go on to the blue team and what their draft consists of. So they have a Hecarim, which Hecarim, I'm not sure why it's so high priority. Like, I'm pretty sure the teams at this point have learned how to play against both Hecarim and Udyr, but they just don't want to stray away from it because they played so many games on it, it's almost like secondhand, right? It's almost like they're playing, it's almost like they're breathing, basically. Like, they've learned how to play Hecarim and Udyr, and they played it so much within scrims, probably, and stuff like that, that they just know how to play it, and they don't want to play anything else. So that's, I think, why the Hecarim Udyr handshake is being made so much. Some teams prioritize Hecarim over Udyr, some teams prioritize Udyr over Hecarim. I would say it's not really a skill matchup. I just think it's even. I don't think either one of these champions are better than the other. I think it's a really even matchup. It really depends on how you play the jungle out. Like if both of these champions play the jungle matchup or jungle layout and pathing just perfectly, then both they're even, right? If they play it poorly, then they're again even. If one plays better than the other, then the one that's playing better is obviously going to have a lead. So Hecarim, I don't really like the champion entirely. I don't think it's that good of a champion, but it is what it is. It gets picked. So let's think about why is Hecarim a pick. What does Hecarim do? Well, he's going to be playing tank Hecarim, right? Obviously. And what Hecarim wants to do is he wants to go in. This is one of the primary functions of Hecarim and both Udyr. Hecarim really wants to go in. The thing about Udyr that I like more than Hecarim, even though I think it's a pretty even matchup, is that Udyr can peel a lot easier than Hecarim with his E, because he just gets to stun anybody that gets close to his carries. Though it's not a long stun, but still it is enough for the carry to be able to flash or to, get away in time, or if you're playing with Varus, to be able to ult them and then get away. So Hecarim is usually just a really good engage champion, and Udyr is not that good of an engage champion because he doesn't have, the unstoppable on his ulti. He doesn't have, the fear either. So Hecarim is getting picked for that. Then we have Alistar, who usually wants to really go in. That's kind of what Alistar wants to do, right? Alistar has a point and click ability with his W that he usually wants to combo with his Q. He has a CC unlock ability that, unlocks him from CC, which means that, he wants to be in the CC so that he can use his ult for it. But he also has an E, which means, or his E rather, makes him want to stick to the target, which makes, so that he can stun them, which again makes him an engaged champion because he wants to be next to the enemy champions. Orianna is really kind of, well, not necessarily like a flex pick, but when it comes to function, she's very much flexible. She can either, be the engage, or she can be the disengage. She's a control mage, that's what they do, right? She's really good at controlling choke points, and she can just combo with Hecarim and Alistar very freely, which is why you're usually going to see Hecarim and Orianna comboed so frequently. Next up, we have Gnar. I don't think Gnar is a good champion, mainly because Gnar is basically like saying, like, oh, you want to have a Hail Mary play. Like, Gnar is basically the champion you want to fall back on to win you the game if you're behind, because if the enemy ever mispositions, Gnar is just going to get an ulti off, and that's basically what he is. Gnar is an ult machine. That's all he does. Gnar is not a champion. Mega Gnar is. Mega Gnar's ulti is the champion. That is all that Mega Gnar is, and people should realize this. You should understand that, because that's basically what Gnar's entire functionality within any kind of composition is. He's pretty safe in laning phase. He has his, hop, he has his slow, he has his movement speed from the W, and then he has a lot of HP, and he has a stun and slow on his Mega Gnar form, so he's pretty safe in laning phase. He's usually not going to have too much of trouble within the top lane, right? So the thing about him is, he's basically used to bypass laning phase and then just use him to win team fights when enemies misposition. That's the only kind of functionality of Gnar. He wants to ult in. He either has to have an insanely good angle, or again, the enemy needs to misposition. And this is why I dislike Gnar, because you shouldn't bank on the enemy making mistakes like that, right? Because if you're behind, then they have to make it multiple times, right? But it is a Hail Mary, which is why people gotta fall back on it. He's not that bad of a champion in laning phase because he's pretty safe, and then he can, win you the game. Like, for example, in the LEC, there was a game, I'm not going to spoil anything, so I'm not going to tell you which game. If you've seen it, you already know, but where basically the Gnar's team was losing the game, and then at one point the enemy mispositioned, and he found an angle to just win the game outright with a Gnar, right? There was also one in the LPL that I'm still mouthing about between EDG and RNG, but that's besides the point. Anyway, so the Vayne here. The Vayne is basically used as kind of a kite champion, right? That's what Vayne is. She has her Q to kite, she has her E to get enemies away from her and stun them as well, right? She has her ulti to be able to deal more damage, she has her passive to be able to chase, but usually this passive is not going to mean much other than laning phase, unless you're already ahead in a team fight and you're just trying to, clean up the kills. That's usually what Vayne is used for. Not to clean up the kills, but I mean to kite, right? So this is kind of a mismatch with these champions that want to go in, because Hecarim, Alistar, and Gnar want to go in, but Vayne really wants the enemies to come in. This is where Orianna comes into play, because she can, just say, okay, you wanna let them come into us? Okay, I'm gonna keep my ball there, and I'm gonna use it to make them engage into us. Then use my ultimate to kind of make a stalemate, and then we can be the ones engaging, which is basically what the blue team wants. The thing is, the blue team has very short range. If you look at it from this perspective, Hecarim is, a melee champion. Alistar is a melee champion. Orianna, yes, she has a lot of range on her ball, but she cannot really throw it far. She's still impacted by her low range. Gnar, pretty much a melee champion, especially in the team fights. Vayne, one of the lowest auto attack ranges of any marksman in the game. And then Combined with that, they are really low range but hard engage, right? This is what this composition is. But then we can get on to the red side. So we have Udyr, who again wants to engage, but he can also peel. We have Rel, who wants to engage, right? That's basically the primary use of Rel. She wants to engage. Victor, you know, he can do whatever. He really doesn't care, right? He can be used for poke. He can engage. He can disengage. He can re-engage, right? Much harder on the disengage, but he can re-engage. The thing about Victor is he's really good into this composition because he outranges all of them. Rel outranges the engage from this. Alistar can be used as a counter to Rel because of her engage, and then he can, you know, just W her away. But, you know, from my experience watching and just generally, you know, playing the game, this usually doesn't happen very often. This counter doesn't happen very often. It's not very reliable. Then you have Scion, who wants to engage, right? But he can also peel for the carries, right? And the thing is, his E also lets his carry, which is in this case Varus, get, you know, armor penetration for free, right? Then you have Varus, who can really go either on hit or lethality here. I would much more prefer him to go lethality in this game because he's just so long range against this entire team composition that the blue team can really do nothing against him. Because even if they control the, let's say, the Drake area, right, or the Baron area, it doesn't matter. The thing is, they don't have to face check it. And if they want to, they have Scion who's going to do it and Rel who's going to do it, right? They're going to have tanky champions that are going to do it. And you can make the argument like, yeah, but Vayne is going to destroy them, right? Not really, because she's going to get immediately outranged by the Victor and the Varus. Varus is going to throw his Q out and deal massive damage, especially if he's going lethality. Victor is just going to use his E, use his ulti, use his gravity field, and now you suddenly cannot play around the, you know, you cannot play around just surrounding the champion as Vayne, right? Because basically what Vayne wants to do is she wants to position she wants to reposition very frequently in fights with her Q, right? And then when you have Victor, you can put the gravity field down, and Vayne can't really do that. She can only stay on one side or go back. She can't really go on, you know, both sides of the spectrum because you're going to have a gravity field there, right? And then that's where Varus as well comes in because he's just going to Q her, right? And then you have Rel, who's going to keep Vayne close because what can Vayne do? She can eat her away, sure, but if you eat her away, then Udyr is going to come at you with his Turbo Camp Tank. If Alistar W's away the Udyr, then here's Scion coming in, and Hecarim can't really do anything. The only thing, again, like I said, is the mispositioning of the red team. If the red team ever mispositions, Orianna and Gnar are just going to throw a Hail Mary and destroy the enemy team. That's basically the primary use of Gnar, and that's basically the only functionality of Orianna into this team composition, because though she's a good champion, with this composition that she has to work with, she cannot do anything else but kind of bet on them mispositioning around her ball. That's the only thing she can do, right? So when we see to it, we understand here that the red team has a better draft. They're favored because they outrange the enemy composition so fucking hard that there's nothing that the enemy can do to contest it, right? And then you also have so much engage that they can only focus your tanks while you're destroying their carries with your long range, because Varus is going to ult probably the front line, so Hecarim is not going to be able to go into them and throw them in because they're going to play around it. Udyr is probably going to play around his carries if he's smart, and Hecarim is not going to be able to push anybody back in with his ulti once he gets out of ulti, when he's going to get, you know, stunned by Udyr. So you have Udyr staying back, you have Rel and Scion engaging. Scion is taking no damage because of his shield, even through the true damage of Vayne. The thing is, he builds health, he stacks health, so it doesn't actually work that well as a counter. Next up on the list is that just, you know, Varus and Victor are going to destroy Orianna and Vayne, and there's nothing to it. And Varus is even going to tear through a lot of the HP from the highly tanky members because he does percentage HP damage. So when you think about it, there's really nothing the blue team can ever do in the situation unless red team just completely botches and is incompetent and has their hands off of their keyboards. That's the only way that the blue team can ever win. And not even off their keyboards, only off their mouse, because they have to reposition. That's the only thing they have to do, is to position semi-well, and they're going to win. That's it. So now imagine, because they're going to pick Gnar anyway, Imagine if Varus was picked R4, right? So Varus gets picked R4, you pick B4 Gnar, you don't have to pick Vayne on B5. If you see Varus, you're probably going to pick something like Ezreal, let's be real. I don't think Sivir is really good enough to be picked, though you can pick Sivir, sure, whatever, it doesn't really matter. And if you pick Varus on R4, and then comes Gnar on B4, and B5 there's an ADC like Vayne or Ezreal, you can just pick Jace here. Jace gets picked here, and you're, whoops, suddenly you're fucking boned. Because look at this team composition. There is nothing this team can do against this composition. Because the thing is, Victor, Varus, and Jace are just gonna deal so much damage to the enemy with sheer range, because they're gonna poke them out. And when they engage, even when they engage, you're first gonna be dealt so much damage to that the blue team is not gonna be able to do anything about it. Jace is gonna hit the accelerated shock blast. Varus is gonna hit his empowered Q. Victor is going to put down his gravity field, use his ultimate, use his E, and just destroy these health bars. And then Jace can transform into hammer form, go to the skies, and just destroy, together with Udyr and Rel, just destroy the enemy composition because they can't do anything. So suddenly, even though they have Orianna, they can't control choke points because they're going to get poked so fucking hard that they're not going to be able to actually live enough to control anything. Much less choke points. They're not going to be able to control their fucking champions because they're going to be gray screen. They can't control choke points if they're dead, I can assure you. So this would just be so insanely good for the red team that there's nothing that the blue team can do. And you can say like, oh, but if they had Ezreal. But again, Ezreal doesn't change much in here. Ezreal, yes, can be picked, but you're picking Ezreal with Alistar. It's not that good, first of all. Second of all, Ezreal, yeah, he can poke, he can maybe carry, but you're putting your entire team on the back of Ezreal. That is what you're doing. And if the Ezreal is good enough, and the enemy team is bad enough, yeah, the Ezreal is probably going to get away with the game. But in professional environments, in competitive environments, you're probably not going to be able to solo carry a game. You know what I mean? Unless the enemy team just makes a lot of mistakes. It's very hard to do so. So yeah, that's basically the simplicity of it. There's, again, not much to think about. Like, this team scales, this team also scales. With Vayne, with Ezreal, it doesn't matter, they scale. But the thing is, the red team scales better and harder than the blue team. Doesn't matter if it's Sion or if it's Jace, they scale better, purely because of range. So if you think about it that way, that's the only thing that can happen. The red team just has to outrange the blue team. You know what I mean? So that's completely just crushing for the red team, or the blue team rather. It's crushing for the blue team because they can't do anything. So this is what I'm trying to say when I say simplicity. The simplicity of drafts and how to understand them is just to think about what each champion wants to do. Like, and now you may be thinking like, okay, but how do I do that? Well, just look at a champion. You know their abilities. If you know their abilities, you know what they want to do. Because a Hecarim with Onslaught of Shadows is not going to look to disengage. He's not going to look to use his ultimate to get away, right? And if he does, then you're probably losing the fight. The Alistar is probably not looking to just W away somebody and run away. Use his W as, disengage, or his ulti as disengage. Probably doesn't want to do that. That's not what he's picked. Orianna, whatever, she's a fucking broken champion in my opinion. Gnar, he's really just an old bot. Like, what else is he gonna do? He's there, like, that like, you can even hear the caster saying like, every time the Gnar is in the fight, it's all about the rage bar. If the Gnar is mega, then you just don't fight. So that means that if the Gnar is mega, that's the only way you can win fights. That means that the only reason why he would even be playable is because of his ulti. Which means that if he cannot actually get to the enemy team composition, he's not going to be useful because he's not going to be able to use his ultimate. And he can't use his ultimate if the entire enemy team composition is completely outranging him. And then you have Ezreal, who's like the, hey guys, yeah, who doesn't even fit into anything here. Because there's no poke, and he doesn't want to engage. He wants to just stay back, poke until the enemy is healthy enough for him to go in and kill them all. But he can't do that with this composition because they want to engage. And he can't do that against this composition with this composition because he's just going to get out-poked. Because there are 3 champions that are going to poke him, Whereas he's one champion who can poke just one champion with his Q, right? He can't actually hit more people than one. Where there you have Varus, you have Jace, you have Victor, who can all hit multiple champions with their poke abilities and deal a lot of damage at that. So it's really just about understanding the champion's abilities to be able to understand what they want to do. And once you know what the champion himself wants to do, then you can easily start like making up a theme, or realizing that there is no theme, or that the champions are off theme and that they don't work well with each other. So now I kind of want to get into pick and ban phase of like something that I would pick, right? Because I mean, here I am talking shit about drafts of other people, but what would I draft if I were in a competitive environment? Now, this is a good question, but the thing is, it's hard to actually answer it because, again, I'm not on a team, I'm not on a professional team or anything like that. So I'm not going to be able to just draft against coaches, right? What I can do is make up a mock draft against myself, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing here. So, to explain better what I mean, let's look at a better draft and think about what we're drafting, and I'm going to talk you through my kind of thoughts if I were to draft, right? So I'm drafting as both teams here. It's going to be a mock draft, whatever. So on B1, I'm immediately honestly thinking like I'm just going to pick Seraphine because she's really good. So on that note, I'm going to ban Rel because I really dislike playing against her. I hate that champion and I think she's really strong, and if I didn't have time to kind of coach my players into understanding how to play perfectly against Rel, I wouldn't feel comfortable with letting them just die like that, right? So red side, I'm seeing Rel. I already know that he's not banning Seraphine. That means he wants to pick it, so I'm gonna ban Seraphine on R1, right? Or on the first ban of red side is what I meant. So now I see the Seraphine ban. I'm thinking maybe I don't know, let's ban Orianna because Orianna is a really strong champion, right? I don't want to see that. And at this point I'm thinking, okay, so maybe we can pick Senna first. So actually I would probably ban, sorry, how do I fucking, there we go, okay. I would actually probably ban Udyr now that I think about it. Like, Udyr is probably a champion that I would ban because I would try to pinch the pool. At this point, I'm either thinking I'm going to first pick Senna or I'm going to first pick Lilia. If they ban something like Hecarim, I'm first picking Lilia. And if they ban something like Lilia, I'm first picking Hecarim. So I kind of want to pick the jungler first because, basically it's two junglers that are left that are actually good in the game. Now you could pick something like Mundo, but I'm not really sure how well it would work in a competitive environment. Mundo is pretty easy to kite around, and you can't really pick him in the first phase because the enemy team is just going to pick a kite composition to be able to kite around him. So I'm going to ban Udyr, and now me here on red side, I'm thinking, well, I can't actually ban Hecarim and I can't actually ban Lilia because if I ban either of these champions, he's just going to first pick them. So if he first picks the other one, then I can't second pick, the first one that I banned. So I'm not going to even ban it. I'm going to ban, Victor here. Or actually I would ban Orianna probably because Orianna is a really fucking strong champion. I'm going to ban Orianna. So I ban Orianna. I don't want you to pick it. Because I'm on red side, I'm thinking, okay, maybe I can ban, maybe I can play Senna then instead, because if he first picks junglers, then I'm gonna pick Senna here. So I'm gonna immediately ban Varus because I'm thinking, okay, I want to play Senna, right? I want to play Senna TK or Senna Choga, just fasting Senna in general, and I will be, by the way, making a video in the near future about drafting Senna, why and how to actually draft her and how to play her well within compositions, how to fit her in compositions. So if that's something you're curious about seeing, please do tell me and subscribe. Anyway, the red side, I see the Varus ban. I immediately know that they want to pick Senna, but I'm gonna say no. If you pick Senna, I'm picking Lilia. So I'm gonna ban Ezreal. And now at this point, Ezreal is banned, but if I pick something like Senna on B1, then they're just going to pick Lilia. And if they pick Lilia, I really don't have a good answer to it because I'm definitely not picking fucking Olaf, and I'm not picking Graves because I don't think Graves is that good of a champion, especially not into Lilia actually, which is weird because a lot of people think that she is good into Lilia. I just don't think so. So I'm going to be picking Lilia, and I'm going to be hoping that they're not picking Senna. Of course, they're going to be picking Senna, and they're going to pick Hecarim with it. Now, you might be thinking, why would you pick Hecarim? Didn't you say you hate Hecarim? Yes, but also no. In this composition, I'm already thinking I'm having Senna, probably Senna Cho'Gath, right? If they don't, for some reason, pick Cho'Gath here. So, I'm going to pick Senna and Cho'Gath. If I'm picking Senna and Cho'Gath into Lilia, I really don't have a way to enter the fight with both of these champions. So instead, I'm going to use a champion that can engage, and I can't play something like Alistar or Rel because she's banned. I can't play something like Alistar or Rel, even though she's banned. I wouldn't be able to pick it even if it weren't banned because I'm playing Fasting Senna. So I'm going to pick Hecarim because he's going to be able to engage and pave the way for my champions, right? So I pick Senna Hecarim here. At this point, I'm thinking, okay, so what's good into Senna? This. But I'm also using it as kind of like a triflex. The reason why I'm not using it as a quadriflex, because you can play, top lane, you can play mid lane, you can play ADC, you can play support. The thing is, I already know what my B3 is going to be because I know that they cannot pick their top laner here. So I'm just going to pick GP immediately here. Once I pick GP, I know that they cannot pick something like Irelia, which is really more of a skill matchup, even though it's better for Irelia if she knows how to play it. But also I don't want to see something like Karma being played into GP, which means that I can pick Karma and then pick GP, right? So I picked that. They can't actually pick their top laner here, whatever they had in mind. So you have to pick kind of Cho'Gath here. You can pick either Cho'Gath or Tahm Kench. The reason why I would pick Cho'Gath here personally is because I'm not seeing a lot of engage from the enemy team composition, or hard engage from the enemy team composition. So I don't really need a TK to kind of eat my Senna. In more ways than one. Anyway, so I picked Cho'Gath here. This is pretty standard, I think. It would be pretty standard. So now I'm kind of flexing my Karma. She can either go mid or she can go bot lane or support, right? The consensus is that she's going to go mid or AD or bot lane, right? Because it's into Senna's. Senna is really bad into enchanters, by the way, which is why you would pick Karma into her. The thing is, I can also pick her support because I'm thinking about maybe I can pick Kog'Maw. So let's see, the first ban from red team, probably would be Victor. Because they're trying to pinch, I would be trying to pinch the mid lane pool hard enough that you couldn't pick it here, right? You would have to put Karma in the mid lane, right? As blue side, I'm going to just be banning probably Orianna. Oh wait, Orianna's banned, sorry. I meant Tristana. Because I do not want Tristana to go into this composition. Then on red side, am I trying to still pinch the mid lane pool? Probably so. So with that, I would probably ban something like, I'm thinking. I would probably ban Zir because it seems like the easiest champion to play into this composition because of Hecarim. Yeah, or actually I would ban TF here. 100% I would ban TF because that would just be way too strong on globals, and I don't want it to stun my Senna. So now that I think about it, I could have also picked Karma TF, but then probably GP would be a ban here, right, instead of TF. So on blue side, I'm just going to be banning probably something like Irelia, because I do not want to play against Irelia, so I'm just going to ban her. Right, so Irelia is banned, so they can't really pick that into GP. They can't pick the Karma. So what is really left for them? The only thing that's really kind of left for them to pick here is probably Jace. Like, speaking of paving the way with Hecarim for Senna and Cho, I'd probably pick Jace here because that's just a lot of damage. The thing is, now I have a lot of AD damage, which means I need an AP mid laner 100%, right? And also the reason why I'm picking Jace here is because if Karma goes mid, I can put Jace mid instead of Jace top lane. If Karma goes bot lane, I'm just going to put Jace top lane. The thing is, Jace is really good into Karma because he can build Serpent's Fang, and Serpent's Fang is really good into shields, which means it's really good into Karma. So we pick Jace on R4, and then B4. Thinking about the draft here, what I'm trying to do, I have a Karma, I have a Lilia, and I have a GP, and I have to round out my composition, which means I'm going to be picking a Kog'Maw here because I have a really good kind of stand your ground composition in the sense that my Kog'Maw is pretty safe. So at this point, I could either pick Braum or I could pick something else. So I don't have to pick my support here because I can always I can always put the Karma as the support champion, right? And at this point, I don't really want to put Karma either mid lane or top lane because Jace would kind of destroy her in lane. Karma, well, he wouldn't destroy her. I don't think Karma just flat out loses to Jace. But it's really not that good of a matchup, and especially when you want Karma to not fall too hard behind, and you also have a Kog'Maw, and you do not want a Braum because you're playing against the Senna and you're playing against the Cho'Gath, or a Senna Cho'Gath. So you want to put the Karma in the support role because it's going to be easier to play against the Senna and it's going to be easier to play against the Cho'Gath. Kog'Maw can really easily just outrange both Senna and Cho'Gath, especially in the early game, and deal a lot of damage to them. So I don't think the Kog'Maw is that bad of a pick here because he has Lilia and GP to kind of protect him with ultis, with barrels, and with the sleep. You have Karma with the shields, with the Ardent Censer, Moonstone, whatever, right? And Staff as well is really good with Kog'Maw because he has a lot of AP ratios actually. But now he wouldn't get movement speed from it. I think now you get ability haste, which is not actually that bad on Kog'Maw, but I guess you would maybe prefer the movement speed. And on B5, now what would you pick here as your mid laner? There aren't a lot of choices. You would probably pick Azir, but what I would personally pick here, what I would really like to pick would be Anivia. If my mid laner would know how to play Anivia, I would probably play Anivia. If not, I would probably play Azir, but you definitely need an AP champion here because, or you don't need it necessarily, but you want an AD champion or an AP champion. And I think Anivia would be good here because, speaking of Hecarim going in, Anivia can just wall the Cho'Gath and the Senna into not being able to follow up the Hecarim. Or if not fast enough, right, or something like that, then you can just use your Q instead to stun them. And then you have incredible zone control with your ultimate, and when you have incredible zone control with Anivia ultimate, and GP barrels, and GP ultimate, and then you have also Lilia, and you have your Karma, and you have, Kog'Maw, it's really hard, first of all, it's really hard to get to Kog'Maw with this composition, and second of all, it's really bloody. Like, this is super hard to get to. You have to, have one of the I don't even know how to explain it. Like, you have to somehow catch them off guard or really set them behind in the early game so that you can scale faster and just destroy them, right? So, and on R5, I'm not entirely sure what I would pick here, honestly. Like, you need an AP champion because everything is AD on your team, so you kind of need an AP champion, right? But what would you even pick here, right? Like, you can't pick Corki because Corki, yeah, he does split damage, but still, right? It's not good enough, I don't think. Thinking about it right now, I'm not entirely sure. At first, I thought maybe you could pick something like, I don't know, Yone or something like that because of his split damage and because it works well with the engage. But then I thought about it, and I don't think that is true. I think you have to pick Syndra here. And this, I would personally favor my blue side draft over my red side draft, but the thing is, if the red side draft gets going, they can really easily win the game, right? Because this Syndra, it's really hard to get through Syndra when you're Kog'Maw. Because Syndra, you can pick something like, I don't know, Azir, for example, but, it's really hard. You can also pick something like Gnar, but again, like I said, I don't think Gnar is a good champion, especially not into this composition with so much zone control, right? So I think Syndra would be really good here because you're you have a very reliable way to just not let the Kog'Maw auto attack, which is one of the most important things against this draft, which is, if Kog'Maw gets to stand still and just shoot his W at you, you're kind of fucked, right? So you want something reliable. Yeah, Jace can do that. Yeah, Cho'Gath can do that. But, Jace and Cho'Gath and, Hecarim can't really do that easily because he's just going to outrange them so hard. But Syndra can because of her E. Because if she puts, she uses her EQ combo, right? To fuck up the animation and make it go well, you don't see it, it's a lot easier to make these plays um, than it would be otherwise, and a lot easier to kind of stunt Kog'Maw from auto attacking, which is damage that is being lost. Now, of course, I would still favor the blue side draft, but it really depends. Like, this would basically be the composition, the compositions. So you would have, a pretty standard laning phase for the top side, Anivia versus Syndra. Bot lane would be very volatile, I think, and without jungle interference, I think like Kog'Maw, Karma just win every day. But it depends on how red team plays it. If they get some dives or something very cheeky or something like that, that they can really use and utilize to kind of get an advantage really quickly, or if GP misplays or something like that, if Jace can get somehow ahead in lane, this could be good for the red team, in my opinion. I still do think that the blue team wins, just because they have stronger champions when scaling, whereas the red team doesn't. They have, scaling champions, but the Syndra is really not going to scale as well as all of these other champions in the game. But you're not really utilizing Syndra for the scaling here. I think you just have to kind of bet on Syndra laning her Scatter the Weak on Kog'Maw to be able to win any fights. So, yeah, that's basically about it when it comes to simplifying drafts. Now, this is a bit more complicated, and there's a lot more arguments that can be made for both sides. I do, again, still think that my blue side draft was much better than the red side draft that I put on, but either way, this is a bit more complicated and going a bit more in depth into draft phase and just in general playing this. You're really not going to be seeing this composition anytime soon. I can assure you in that. Unless I'm going to coach a team like tomorrow, you're not going to see this anytime soon. So anyways, yeah, basically what is the simplicity of draft and how to understand draft is to just think about the champions. So I basically did this so that I can show you how to really think about what you're doing. So when I was drafting this, I kind of spoke about my thoughts behind every single pick and every single ban. And you can disagree with them. You don't have to. Maybe you agree with them. You can disagree with them. It doesn't matter. What matters is that even if you disagree, you put thought behind it. And you don't just parrot what somebody else says. Because yes, maybe the casters are right. Yes, maybe this person that said this is right. Maybe this person that said that is right. It doesn't matter. But first, think about what they said. Think about what they said and think about if you agree with what they said. Because many times it doesn't have to be like the ultimate truth, right? It doesn't have to be 100% true. It can be only 90% true, right? Because sometimes they're going to say something and it's going to be like, yeah, that's right, but like, what if, you know what I mean? And that's the thing. So it's really easy to kind of get into draft, but the hardest part is to learn how to think about it. And that is what, if you're, if you want to argue about, G2 versus Mad Lions and their drafts and how Karma was bad, which that wasn't the reason why they lost, but I'm going to be making another video pretty soon about that as well. In any case, if, when you're watching and stuff like that, just think about what these champions do to be able to kind of understand what is being done and what is being said and who is right. And maybe nobody's right. Maybe, it's just a thing of kind of whatever, right? Like maybe it's just a thing of maybe they're even drafts, but they're doing something so wildly different that the one that is easier to pull off is going to win. But the thing is, that's not always going to be true. Sometimes the easier draft isn't going to win because if the enemy team has practiced their harder draft, the thing is the harder drafts usually have more things that they can utilize. And so when the harder draft is practiced more and longer, it's usually going to win over the easier draft to play. So it really depends on, was the coaching and was the prep time for this draft long and good enough to be able to beat an easier draft, right? Sometimes it's just going to be about that. It's not even going to be about individual skill or anything like that. It's just going to be about, was there enough prep time and was it long enough, right? Which is what I'm really trying to get through to you, because that's what it is. And the importance of draft really is the fact that, especially right now in the current landscape of professional competitive League of Legends, draft is super important. Like, because a team, the teams in the higher caliber teams, they're very close to individual skill, which means that the champions they have picked against the champions that were picked are going to really matter. The composition and what it wants to do is really going to matter, especially against the enemy team composition, because they're both really close in skill level. So the thing is, you want to show how good you are by picking good champions and demolishing the enemy team that doesn't know how to draft. That is, I think, why draft is super important currently, because you are so close in individual skill that you need all the help you can get to be able to win without having a lot of issues, you know? So why doesn't the coach that's drafting, that's, helping with the draft, or, giving you the draft or planning the draft or whatever, right? That's just drafting the champions. Why doesn't he help you and actually draft good champions? Like, why not? I think one of the better coaches when it comes to drafting, at least in the latter half, because I can't remember what their earlier draft was, is Rogue. I think Rogue have had one of the best drafting in the league, especially in playoffs, or particularly in playoffs. It was a thing of not understanding entirely your composition and how to play it, but that doesn't take away from how good the draft itself was, because if the draft, the thing is, in these, again, higher caliber teams that are competing, with the drafts, you kind of have to know how to play them. If you're going up against a relatively kind of even matchup. And that is why Gnar is such high priority, because you're kind of banking on the enemy team not having enough prep time or not really caring enough to put time into their composition and to learn how to exactly play it, because they're going to then eventually misposition and you're just going to destroy them with the Mega Gnar ultimate. And that is, in my opinion, unacceptable. That shouldn't happen. And that draft from earlier, that should never happen. That shouldn't, blue side should never be able to win in that draft. But sometimes it happens because the red team doesn't know how to play the game and doesn't know how to play the draft. Though I think that was kind of an extreme example of like a red side draft that is just so good. So I'm personally really disappointed in how games go. And this is the reason why I wanted to create these videos, is because, I kind of want to see betterment both in LEC, LCS, because I think LCK and LPL draft really well. I don't think they draft incredibly well. I think LCK drafts really well. I think the LPL has, somewhat poor drafts, but they're so good when it comes to just generally macro and micro that they can make it work. But yeah, I want the regular viewer that doesn't really know what's happening and what to think about and what to point out when he sees the draft, to understand the draft better. And I hope this video helps with that. But I also want you to understand that what is being drafted by a coach doesn't necessarily mean it's good. And just because it doesn't work doesn't necessarily mean it's the draft's fault. Right? Because I think a lot of people kind of bank on that. It's like, whenever my team loses, it's the draft's fault. It was the draft. It's never the team not being able to play properly. So I think that's the thing. You should always look and understand the draft, and then when you see them lose, you should wonder, hey, why did they lose if they had a good draft? Maybe you come to the conclusion that they didn't have the good draft. But if you come to the conclusion that they did, and that they just played very poorly, then that's a different thing. And that's exactly why I wanted to make this video for so long. I hope this video helps you understand how to think about draft and why drafting is so important within the game, especially currently. I really do. And if you have anything to say about it, if you have any critique, if you have anything, um, any rebuttal against anything that I've said here, please do leave it in the comments below, because I would love to have a discussion about this. If you liked what I had to say, if you liked the video, please do like and subscribe. There will be more videos coming soon. Again, like I said, I want to do a video on G2 versus Rogue and Mad Lions, and I also want to do a draft analysis on Senna, or on fasting Senna, because I think that's a very interesting strategy. That's one of my favorite strategies, just point blank period. I think I love fasting Senna both in competitive play and like just to play it with a friend in solo, or in solo queue or flex or whatever, just for fun. But yeah, so if you like the video, please do like. Again, if you have any friends that you want to show this to, please do share. If you dislike the video, if you don't like what I have to say, do dislike it. That also helps. If you have any critique, be it positive or negative, please do leave it in the comment below. I will, hopefully it's constructive. Whether it's positive or negative, hopefully it's constructive, because I would really love to make better videos. I'm just not sure entirely how, because I'm pretty new to this. But yeah, other than that, thank you so much for watching. Follow my socials if you want to. And that's it.